Now, for the next talk, we have two speakers, both from the Graz University of Technology, if I'm correct. It's Mario Werner, as well as Robert Schilling. Both are researchers there. And they're going to talk to us about protecting RISC-V processors from physical attacks.
Okay. Hello, good afternoon. My name is Mario Werner, and together with my colleague, Robert Schilling, we will give you now a brief introduction into physical attacks, why we should care about them, how we prevent those attacks, and what they do with a process in general. So let's jump right into it. Why do we care? I mean, I think I don't have to argue with any one of you that it doesn't make any sense to write the best software that you can, as long as we don't have working hardware. When we look at the modern computing landscape, that's actually a problem because most of the devices we use nowadays, mobile phones, laptops, tablets, smartwatches, and so on, they are made for being mobile, for being carried around, and they operate in environments which you don't really control. We have the same situation in cloud computing, where you use servers where you don't know where they are located, you don't know who controls them, in what environment they operate. And what happens as the result is that as soon as you change the operating conditions of such a device, the hardware maybe stops to malfunction or do weird stuff. And that's actually exactly what a fault attack is about. So we change the operating conditions of our device. Maybe we change with the operating voltage. We inject glitches in the clock lines of our processor, or we use a laser to inject light pulses into the die and cause faults. However, it's not necessarily a hardware attack. There are also software versions of fault attacks. For example, this Rowhammer stuff, which we had a few years ago. Finally, what happens with such a fault? It's actually quite simple. The processor starts to behave strangely. Maybe some data is changed. Maybe your pointers point to something different. Or simply the control flow is messed up. So your processor starts to jump to destinations which are not the target of your jump, or you have a branch and which you should take, but you do not take it because of that. And that's actually problems. The Xbox 360, for example, one of the best attacks which exist on this hardware is a fault attack, where they glitch the reset line to bypass the signature check of the firmware. So what can we do against this stuff? It's quite simple. We add redundancy everywhere. On a more serious note, we have actually already seen a few countermeasures yesterday in the talk about hardening processes against space, for space environments. What we usually do here is we use modular redundancy, spatial redundancy. We duplicate our processor, our system on chip, and continuously check if they calculated different results, and then decide on report the failure. The problem here is if you have to duplicate everything, it's really expensive. So think of duplicating all your cache memory, all the RAM maybe, SRAM on a microcontroller. That's too expensive. And also, it's not really flexible. So you cannot decide on sections which we want to protect with high redundancy, and others where maybe a lower degree of redundancy is sufficient. Software countermeasures, on the other hand, are more flexible, obviously. We can control how much redundancy we want to have. However, software countermeasures still rely on operating hardware to a certain degree. So they usually have rather strong assumptions. For example, instruction skip models, where you can only deal with skipping instructions in the pipeline, but you can't deal with bit flips or something like that. So what we want to have are more fine granular approaches, which we directly can integrate into a processor and hopefully yield cheaper and more secure results. So in summary, we simply want to protect our instructions, meaning that the encodings should be genuine. We don't want bit flips. A single bit flip is already sufficient to change the meaning of your program completely, so take a conditional branch. If you flip one bit, maybe it jumps exactly on the inverted condition and your password check or something is pointless. We want to ensure that all instructions are executed into the right sequence, so that's links into software security as well. We have to ensure that our processor executes our program, not something else. And obviously, we also want to ensure that the execution itself is correct. So the control flow instructions should do the right thing, memory accesses address the right memory, and ALU operations operate on the right data. For the first 2 points, we will talk about control flow integrity, which we worked on, and the other points are basically addressable in software, but for performance reasons, we also have 2 works there, which help a little bit. So control flow integrity. It's basically the same concept which you also use to counteract software attacks, but here we use it to enforce the integrity of our instructions and the sequence of the instructions in the processor. How this works is that we encrypt our program in execution sequence during compilation time. So the idea is that the processor is only capable of decrypting our instructions to the correct meaning if all previous instructions have been correct and the coding is correct as well. For this, we added a decryption stage here in the pipeline between the fetch and the decode stage. And for our prototype, we really decrypt each instruction individually, one after the other. As mentioned before, it's stateful, so faults propagate. And this ensures that instructions itself, the encodings are correct, and that the sequence is genuine. If something went wrong, this decryption yields a pseudo-random instruction stream, which we can detect with trap handling and recover from that. We have a prototype for this whole concept. It supports arbitrary control flow, including indirect calls, and also interrupt or trap support. For that, we integrated or used an ISA extension with custom control flow instructions. We could also replace the original ones, but we wanted to stay compatible with the original source code, so we can execute on this prototype original RISC-V source code and also the encrypted one. And yeah, we also have compiler support for that, so you just use your C program, put it through the compiler, and you get out an encrypted program which is executable on this chip. And finally, we also built the chip from that in cooperation with ETH Theory here. It's a microcontroller which operates at 100 megahertz in UMC 65 nanometer technology. And for this chip, around 30 kilogates were necessary to build this encryption engine or decryption engine. Yeah, in terms of runtime, we are also quite good. So 10% and 20% code size is for this research prototype. With that, let me hand over to my colleague.
So the second topic I want to talk is securing conditional branches. So when data meets the control flow, we have these instructions like a conditional branch. And they are basically everywhere. Operations like secure boot, signature verification, they all rely on the correct execution of this one single instruction. But the problem is this is not yet protected by any means of control flow integrity. So when we look at a conditional branch, we have first this comparison operation, which computes a condition, and then we have the branch. So an attacker has different possibilities to bypass the conditional branch. It can fault the branch, it can tamper with the comparison operation, or it can tamper with the input data of the conditional branch. So in order to have a secure conditional branch, we have to mitigate all of these attack vectors. So what we do is we first add data redundancy. So we employ an encoding scheme called Encodes to add redundancy to our data. And on top of that, we now can develop an encoded comparison operation, which instead of computing just one bit, it computes an n-bit symbol. So we have an n-bit symbol for the true case, and another n-bit symbol for the false case. So we have redundancy now. But how can we use that to securely branch? Well, one observation is that this condition value actually determines the branch target. So when we computed a true symbol, we know we need to go to the true path of the code, and vice versa. So what we first do is we take an ordinary conditional branch. This sounds maybe a little bit stupid because we have, again, this one-bit intermediate value with no redundancy. But what we now can use is, we can use our redundant condition value with, where we have this redundancy, and use that as a branch target dependent CFI state update. So this allows us to protect the conditional branch because we now have to correctly compute the comparison operation and to branch correctly in order to have the correct execution of the software. Otherwise, we would have a CFI state error. In our work, we combined all of these into one single instruction as an ISA extension. So in this work, we basically closed the gap between data protection and CFI. We have a generic approach where we link a redundant condition value with the CFI state by adding just one single instruction to the RISC-V processor. And we are not bound to any specific data encoding scheme because this happens in software. We also have a prototype compiler based on LLVM, so we can automatically instrument the code, add data protection there, and protect the conditional branch. Our overheads show that we are on par with state-of-the-art schemes like replicating conditional branch, but we also add data protection here. The last topic I want to talk about is memory. So memory accesses are, besides computation, the most common used operations. So let's look at a very simple example. So we have a pointer pointing to some legit memory address. An attacker can now tamper with that pointer and change the address. So all subsequent memory accesses would then possibly access a secret value. Another type of attack is when we have the pointer and a fault attack happens directly at the memory access, so on bus level, for example, and thereby the attacker is maybe able to redirect the memory access again to the secret value. So in order to protect that, we first add pointer protection. So we add redundancy to our pointers. In particular, we encode pointers using multi-residue codes, which allow us to protect the pointers during storage, but also allows us to protect the pointer arithmetic. Hereby, we store the the redundancy directly inside the pointer in the upper bits of the pointer by reducing the address space. Second, the access protection is done by linking this redundant address information with its corresponding data. So we scramble the data using this address information. So when a wrong access happens, we get scrambled data. And by employing a data protection scheme, we eventually are able to detect these wrong memory accesses. We integrated that to RISC-V, in particular, based on the RISC-V processor by ETH, we added a dedicated residue ALU and added linked memory accesses. We also have a custom compiler based on LLVM to automatically transform all data pointers, transform the pointer arithmetic, and also insert these linked memory accesses to our program. We have 7% runtime overhead and 10% overhead in terms of code, so it's quite good for first research prototype. So to summarize that, with new use cases where applications or software is deployed in the wild, we really need to ensure that our hardware executes correctly. And so physical security is now really important. And here RISC-V really helps us to develop new countermeasures. If you're interested in this work, there's also an extended version of this talk available and has been uploaded by the RISC-V Security Standing Committee. Finally, we are also doing other research. So we are doing a lot of side channel research, in particular to microarchitectural attacks. So especially Meltdown Spectre and Rambleed very, very recently. So if you're interested to work with us, we are actively looking for collaborations. So with that, I'm now at the end. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. We have time for a short question.
This is great. So what do you mean by remediation? So you detect that something is out of order, right? It's not what is expected to be. And then what happened to the core? It just stops?
Depending on the countermeasure. So for CFI, for example, if an instruction is wrong, then a trap gets executed, and then we can bring the system into a safe state again.
Isn't that denial of service?
Pardon?
Isn't that the definition of denial of service, right? So you keep restoring something and think nothing works.
If you fault your system, you always destroy the computation. I mean, what will you do?
Okay, thank you.